What's up? And you are now tuned into another episode of Expansion Pack. I'm your host, Dan F. Man. Every time I hear myself say that, I think about the summer. Let me do a little quick flashback because it's going to lead us into our topic. I think about this summer and when I was building this program from just sitting in the garage playing the game to going into office and having to actually let me start my timer having to actually talk about stuff and talk about things. That right there is in and of itself a feat that I can't go back from. I can't go back from that, and I'm really, really proud of myself for that. So, welcome to another episode of Expansion Pack. I'm your host, Dan F. Man. This is DGTA TV. Uh-huh. And today we are talking about intuitive. Golly, I always do that. I draw a blank. I be having these great titles. And then, hold on, let me find it. I know I got it on. That's right. Intuitive guidance. Yeah, I knew I had it. Intuitive guidance. First, let's just explore this. I spelled instincts, but let's watch it.
Have you ever wondered why red and green lights are used to guide people across the street all over the world?
And yes, this is mental health.
It is because using red and green lights work well with basic human instincts to make the safe decisions the easy ones. The reason for that is to be found in the evolution of the human brain. The human brain is more than 2 million years old and well suited to live in a simple environment. An environment like, for example, the savannah. Here, we get instant feedback on our actions. This means that if we were standing here and we started clapping, we would instantaneously know if that was a good or a bad idea. We would know that by looking at the lioness. If she started attacking us, clapping was a really bad idea. But if she started running away, it turned out to be a good idea. Here, everything is what it seems to be. If something is blue, it's probably cold and you can drink it. If something is black with yellow stripes, it's probably venomous and it will sting you. But you will know the moment you touch it. You will get instant feedback on your actions. These simple feedback mechanisms and surroundings subconsciously guide our instincts in predictable ways. They work well together with our habit behavior or System 1 thinking. This means that regardless where we live or what language we speak, simple feedback mechanisms like red and green light can be used to guide behavior into safe and healthy habits.
Oh my gosh. Sorry. Let me get us another video. I don't even care about the game. Instincts. Let's see.
We have someone who wants to be president who has consistently attempted to use race to divide. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this. We all have dreams and want a president who invests in those, not in division.
There are at least 3 instincts that contribute to behavior in human beings and contribute to abnormalities of behavior and abnormalities of experience. There is a set of instincts that are to do with simply with self-preservation and the continuation of one's genes. So there is aggression, there is sex, and these instincts we share with most mammals, at least. A second set of instincts is to do with attachment, to do with the relationship between a mother and an infant, and a caregiver and the infant, and the infant's need to be protected by the caregiver, and the caregiver correspondingly to trigger a set of behaviors that will protect the infant. And attachment is there in most primates. But there's a third instinct that we only see in human beings. And that instinct is communication. How we pass on knowledge from one generation to another. There has to be a mechanism for learning about culture. And this is what, as humans, we have evolved, and where our social nature obviously fits in.
All right, we keep going.
I hope everyone still has some energy left. I'm gonna make it very easy on you because I'm just gonna show you pictures and a funny video. So I hope you will sleep very, very good tonight after seeing this. I'm gonna go back to 2010. I was studying here in Breda at the art school. I studied documentary photography.
I'm trying
I was
to stay
28.
away from TED Talks. I'm sorry, y'all. Playing this game sometimes be killing me.
I want to come back to this question of
that's what I'm
instinct
here for,
because, I mean,
expansion
I think there was this
Y'all just
old
listen
idea that, oh, humans have agency. I mean, obviously we have evolutionary drives, but we're not fundamentally governed by instinct. Whereas animals, it's all about instinct. It's all about, evolutionary imperatives. And my sense is that kind of thinking has sort of gone out the window. But I don't know. I mean, Ken, how do you think about it?
I think that's right. I mean, humans have powerful instincts. Many times we tend to bury them. We have, obvious instincts, a drive towards food, a drive towards sex to reproduce and so forth. But there's, an entire field that E.O. Wilson once called sociobiology, which is the evolution of social behavior among animals. And when you apply that to humans, you discover some interesting things. And one of those are the instincts we have to behave in certain ways towards people who are blood relatives. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. It's sort of a chilling example. There are statistics from the US, from Canada, and from the Scandinavian countries comparing instances of infanticide in families where the father was the biological father of the child victim and where the father was the stepfather. And the instances of infanticide in all cases, fortunately, are extremely rare. But an adopted, a stepfather is, in various studies, anywhere from 50 to 70 times more likely to kill the stepchild than a biological child. Now, that's a chilling statistic, and I remember lecturing about it to my freshman biology class, and I said, it's going to be shocking. So brace yourself. And all of you who come from families with step-parents might wonder how you survived to the age to be university. But even in that case of the stepfather, the incidence over a lifetime is something like 1 in 3,000. So most step-parents are loving and effective parents. I believe that absolutely. But what is the instinct that overlays the human tendency towards aggression, the human tendency to react violently and so forth, is obviously a strong instinct towards the preservation and nurturing of those whom we know and can identify as blood relatives. And I see no other way to sort of account for the origin of that other than to say that is an instinct. And it's an instinct related to something called kin selection. And kin selection is something that happens that basically involves the evolution of altruistic behaviors, self-sacrificing behaviors, which can be favored by evolutionary pressures if they are directed towards those who are close relatives. Because in a way, any gene or group of genes motivating such behavior can have an adaptive advantage because that gene is likely engendering behavior that is taking care of copies of itself. Because that's what family members have, is a slice of your own genetic information.
Right.
So those instincts in terms of human behavior are strong, even if we don't realize they're there.
So let me ask the question in the opposite way. What do you think, and I'm addressing this to any of you, what do you think cannot be explained through what we would call evolutionary psychology or, what E.O. Wilson called sociobiology, that it's not fundamentally about survival, reproduction, or food. It's just, those just don't explain it at all. What falls outside of those categories in humans
They
or
always
in
lag
other
me
animals?
out.
Carl, what would you say?
Well, I was taught
Always kick me out the game.
all of this stuff very similar to the way you just described it. And I've always been troubled by that answer because it often doesn't seem to ring true. We share almost absolutely all of our genes with each other. And in addition, sex evolved to mix genes. If genes really were obsessed with reproducing themselves, we would all be parthenogenic species. So it's always seemed to me that there's a lot else going on, or there's something wrong with some of the theory. I think there's something right with a lot of the theory, but it's always troubled me. E.O. Wilson's book, Sociobiology, which I loved, simply said, we have no capacities that are not capacitated genetically. We're not just a blank slate that can just self-invent based on capacities we dream up without a genetic template that gives us these capacities. But there may be other answers. I mean, even to the example that you raised, I'm a stepfather, and what comes with being a step-parent? Usually a broken home, a dead parent, in my case, the rage of my stepdaughter, who was mad about everything because she felt that she had to carry the banner for her father. It's difficult. It's not just a biological situation. So I just think there's probably other things to it. I think there's a lot about it that's correct, and I think there are other things that we keep missing because we keep telling ourselves some of the same stories.
Y'all give me 1 second. Let's get this in there.
We built a 7-figure business as a 2-person agency, and I wish we had HoneyBook when we started.
Hold on, I gotta close my app real quick and come back. All right, let's get this going.
There's something deeply wrong with the way we put tasks on a to-do list, and here's why. It's ongoing.
Hi, Sonia here, and this week we are talking about appearance. So one thing that I find so often with my clients, in my readings all the time, in my coaching and my mentoring, is that we make a lot of assumptions. We make a lot of assumptions about people. We make a lot of assumptions about life. We make a lot of assumptions about ourselves and our capabilities. And when we get caught up in those appearances, that's where we're not using not only our reasoning skills, but our intellect to be in support of our intuition. Because if we can think a little bit more critically and actually be open and say, does this resonate as true? We can be more available and open for guidance and sift through things that don't actually resonate. So the other week I went to get a haircut from a lovely gentleman in Detroit. And he was an older man, and he's washing my hair, and he asked me what it is that I do. And my first inclination, my first appearance of who he was that he wasn't going to get it. He wasn't going to get what it is that I do, so I'm not going to say anything. But I decided not to get caught up in appearance, not to assume, and just say, I teach people how to trust their intuition, how to have their head and their heart be the best of friends. I teach people how to get in touch with their spirit. And he's quiet. I washed my hair. He's quiet for a while. And then he starts cutting my hair. We're in the chair. And then he starts to tell me about his spirit. He goes, oh, you talk about spirit. Let me tell you about my spirit. He tells me these fantastic stories. He tells me this wonderful story about how he was renting this apartment in downtown Detroit and got a notice that he wasn't allowed to do anything. He wasn't allowed to put anything up on the walls, and was living in this barren apartment. But he's an artist. Not only is he an artist, but he's an interior designer. But he said, my spirit said, decorate this apartment and you're going to get free rent. And his intellect said, no, that's impossible. But he said, my spirit said that. So he did. He decorates his whole apartment, changes some of the doors, paints it, gets the walls, changes the whole thing. And maintenance came over to fix a plumbing issue. Worried whether or not he's going to get kicked out. Actually, the maintenance guy said, we love your apartment so much, I'm going to tell management. Management comes up and sees his apartment, and they give him 6 months free rent because they not only photographed his apartment for the brochure for the apartment, but showed it to potential renters as a sort of a layout. And he was like, my spirit was the one that told me that. And it was interesting because for me, that was where my own intellect that didn't want to be more curious would have gotten caught up. And I would have missed this man completely, this really brilliant, kind, incredible, wonderful, awesome person. And we talked about intuitions, right? And nerded out, and it was so much fun. But this is where we can use our intellect. This is where we can use our critical thinking to start to pay attention to what are the things that we believe that we haven't challenged, that our stories about people, whether it's our coworkers, whether it's about life, whether it's about being able to get a relationship, our guidability, our success, our capability. Really, this week, use your grounded logic reasoning skills, not story, to start to really pay attention and see, does this resonate? Does this resonate as true? Is this solid? Intuition is seeing clearly. And that means that we have to start by clearing our own windows of perception, by challenging what are the assumptions, beliefs, stories, things that have been told to us by others. So much of society, our family, our friends, different things that have been reflected back to us, told of who it is that we are, can very much fog our windows of perception. And this is where we can have our intellect be in service to our intuition by saying, is that actually true? So this week, get clear on what your stories are. What are the things that hold true? What are the assumptions you make about other people? How clearly are you seeing, or how much are you assuming? And have fun with it. That's my favorite part. Have fun with it. Challenge yourself. Make a stretch. All the time. I was talking to even one of my clients I was giving a reading to, and she says, I'm all alone. She was living down in the South, and she was like, I believe it was like in Texas, and she's like, I'm all alone. There's no one around me. There's no one to be able to talk to intuition about this. I get this all the time. And I say, that's an assumption. That's an assumption. Right, and okay. Now she's telling me that she's going to start her own meditation group, and she's going to start to be a beacon of light for other people, because you never know. We just assume that people won't get it as a way to be self-protective. So
right. I like that. My intuitive side led me to that video. Let's go, Tammy. Let's see what you got. Tammy!
Hi everyone, it's Tammy Mastroberti with Elevated Existence. Today I am going to teach you 3 ways to access intuitive guidance. No matter what you think, you are intuitive. You can do this. You just have to open up your awareness, take the steps, and try it out. And trust that what you're getting is what you should be. So, they're quick and easy things that you can do to sort of test this out and to help you get the intuitive guidance that you need, okay? The first thing is meditation. I know you don't want to hear it, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Meditation is key. Now, it doesn't have to be the 20 minutes of meditation all the time. It can just be spurts of meditation where you're learning to quiet your mind. 3 minutes here, 5 minutes here, 60 seconds here, that you recheck in with yourself and you check in with spirit. If you talk to any psychic, any medium, anybody who works in that field of intuition or teaches intuition, they are going to tell you that meditation, quieting the mind, slowing things down, is the way to make that connection. That's when things start coming in, when the chattering of the mind slows down. So if you're even trying to make a decision on something, and your head is just filled with worry and stress, and you're not sure what to do, and you're driving yourself crazy, that is when you say, wait a minute, I need to reconnect with my higher self and with my intuitive guidance. I am going to calm myself down. I am going to close my eyes. I'm going to take 2 minutes, 3 minutes to focus on my breath, to repeat a mantra. You can just repeat, I am connected over and over again. Slow yourself down, and then try and tackle the solution and see what comes in. And you can even ask yourself a question when you're in that calm, quiet state, and see what comes to you and be open to what comes to you. Another thing that I like to do, and it really is very helpful, and it helps open up that connection, is if you're dealing with something in your life, sit down and write the universe, spirit, even your loved ones on the other side. Write them a letter saying, here's what's going on in my life. Here's what I need help with. Here's where I'm having trouble. Or I could really use some guidance on XYZ. And I'm not sure which way to go. I'm not sure what to do. I could definitely use your help. Write it all out in the letter like you're talking directly to the universe, to spirit, to your guides, to whomever that you feel connected to. Write it all out and then put the letter away and just stop for a minute and say, thank you, thank you, thank you for your help and answers. I will be open to receiving them. And then go on about your life. Give it a few days and see what happens. See if an answer doesn't automatically somehow pop into your head. You don't think of something that reminds you of something else, and then you Google something and there's your answer. Or somebody all of a sudden calls you and they have an answer. Or you go into Starbucks and you overhear somebody else talking about something and that's your answer. Okay, the universe, your spirits, your spirit guides, and your loved ones on the other side. That's how they get information to you. That's how the intuition works. It's a thought that kind of pops in your head out of nowhere, or a situation that you walk into and all of a sudden, the proverbial book falls off the shelf and that's the answer that you're looking for. But put it out there and then give it a few days and see what happens. And know that when those answers come, that is your intuition opening up. That is your guidance that you're getting from whomever it is that you asked for. So try that out. And the last thing I want to just share with you quickly is something that I learned to do, I started doing a couple of years ago. When I'm struggling with something or I just need inspiration or help, I will sit down in the modern day of technology. I like to do it on a computer. A lot of you will hear about automatic writing where people just sit down and start writing. I like to just sit down, close my eyes, put my fingers on the keyboard and type. And I will literally put out sometimes I'll say, dear spirit guides or, my loved ones or whomever. And I'll just say, I'm calling in, a lot of times I'll say calling in my angels and guides and loved ones on the other side, only those of the highest vibration. I am struggling with da-da-da-da. Or sometimes I'll just say, what do I most need to know right now in my life? And I'll just allow myself to type. I don't think about it. I don't correct it. I don't get grammatical with it, right? I just sit and I just let it flow out of me. No matter what it is, and I don't question it, and I just let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. And then when I feel I'm done, sometimes I'll ask more than one question. I'll say, well, what about this? And I'll ask different questions, and I just allow it to come through me. And often when I go back and read it afterwards, I think, this is pretty cool because I don't think I talk like that all the time. Or I don't know if I were to write this, if I would have said it that way. And one time, I'll never forget, a few years back, I kind of got this intuitive hit that my mother was trying to get in touch with me. It was actually, I was typing something on my cell phone and her name popped in my head. Had nothing to do with what I was typing. In the middle of typing a text or an email, I don't remember what it was. And I stopped for a second. I thought, that is really odd. Maybe she's around. So I sat down at the computer and I typed a whole bunch of stuff out. And then I thought I had completely lost my mind. And so I thought, well, this is great stuff, but how do I know this is really you? And about 45 minutes later, I had a friend of mine who happens to be a medium call me. And she said to me, I don't know why your mom's here, but da-da-da-da. And she started repeating all the stuff that I wrote down. And I thought, this is my confirmation.
That's right, girl. All right, check this out. Let's get some fun into the show for the day.
1, 2, 3, go! Faster, faster, faster!
That's not what I wanted. CBS don't.
Here are 4 reasons why you need to start taking care of your liver. Reason number 1.
Bye. Have a good day. Bye.
Bill and Hillary Solomon attribute their happy 16-year marriage to an unseen force, perhaps greater than love.
Too many coincidences for it to be random.
That's right, coincidence. The Solomons say a series of unbelievable coincidences really left them little choice.
Do you think you would have gotten married
had this not been all such a coincidence?
I don't know that we would have met. I don't know that we would have met.
Coincidence 1. Bill's mother and Hillary's father were high school friends who hadn't been in touch for 40 years when they reconnected by chance.
They realized that one had a son named Bill and one had a daughter named Hillary. The Clintons were in the White House at the time, so they thought, oh my gosh, how funny. Where does Bill live? Lives in New York, so does my daughter Hillary. We got to fix him up.
Coincidence 2. In a city of more than 7 million people, Bill and Hillary lived in the same neighborhood, on the same street, in the same building. In fact, in the very same line of apartments. There they were, just 7 floors apart. And your parents can't believe this.
They were shocked.
Bill's mother insisted he had to call Hillary, but he played it cool until, coincidence 3, he ran into a former coworker in his building.
I said to her, what do you do in my lobby? She said, I have a really good friend that lives in your building. And I said, who is that? And she said, Hillary Kimmelman. I said, oh my God, I have her number in my pocket.
With that, Bill made the call, and the rest is history.
Coincidence is a striking co-occurrence of events that appear to be meaningfully related, but in fact are related only by chance.
Professor Jay Kohler at the Northwestern School of Law in Chicago is an expert on probability.
A classic example of coincidence would be you get to thinking about somebody who you haven't thought about for years, and you reach for the phone, and you know where I'm going with this. The phone rings. It's them. It's them.
Coincidences seem to fascinate us all, especially when they involve unlikely characters like Thomas Jefferson here. When Jefferson and John Adams signed the Declaration of Independence, they had no idea that they would one day be linked by a very freaky coincidence.
These two guys, both presidents of the United States, both died on the same day, July 4th. Not just any July 4th, but the exact 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And that was the beginning of my questioning whether there was something more to coincidence than just coincidence.
For Squire Rushnell, it was a sign. The one-time TV executive has started a successful cottage industry, books, speeches, all about coincidences, or as he calls them, Godwinks.
A Godwink is one of those little coincidences that makes you say two things. Wow, what are the odds of that? And I wonder, is that coincidence evidence of divine origin?
Rushnell's answer, a resounding yes.
I believe that everybody has Godwinks. They are like gifts left on the doorstep. And my job is to get you to open the door and open your gift.
Inside that Godwink gift box, Rushnell says you might find the right relationship, like Bill and Hillary Solomon did, or even the right career. This is the CBS Evening News. Susan Spencer reporting.
Now, there was something that caused you to be at CBS. Maybe it was a call out of the blue. Maybe it was somebody you bumped into. But maybe it wasn't by chance at all. Maybe it was by Godwink.
Maybe it was because I applied for a year.
Yeah.
So there's some research to suggest that a feeling of destiny can be good for you mentally.
But even if it is reassuring, it is not reality, according to science writer Matt Hudson, who says that while coincidences are not destiny, they are destined to happen, thanks to something called the law of truly large numbers.
It's a term that a couple of mathematicians came up with to describe this idea that with a large enough sample of events, any outrageous thing is likely to happen.
Yeah, we know
Another
that.
way of thinking about it is if you flip a coin long enough, eventually you'll get 10 heads in a row, and the universe flips a lot of coins.
All those coin flips add up to a simple mathematical answer for even the weirdest coincidences, like this one.
William Regan says he played the numbers on a fluke.
The New York State Lottery on the first anniversary of 9/11. You know what the winning numbers were?
I assume it was.
Take a guess.
I assume it was 911.
Right.
Yeah. In a world where there are lots of people and lots of events happening to lots of people every day, you're going to come across a co-occurrence of events that seems to be extremely unlikely.
You're taking all the fun out of it.
Well,
Right.
So when two former presidents died on the same day, it wasn't mystical, just mathematical. Though we tend to make these things mystical by ignoring
okay, but they
annoying
start with the
little
same
details.
letter.
So
Hold
when
on, I'm
people were
gonna talk to
comparing Jefferson and Adams, there were lots of things they looked for that they didn't find. Were their wives born on the same day? No, scratch that. Did they have the same number of kids? No, scratch that. Did they name their kids the same thing? No. And the selection fallacy is to select out the interesting parts.
You know, it's just like we're hardwired to be amazed by these things.
Exactly. That's the power of human irrationality.
But what about the power of God winks or the force of destiny? Science writer Matt Hudson.
I can't rule it out, just as I can't rule out unicorns, but there's no strong evidence for unicorns.
Wow, you really are a killjoy, aren't you?
It's my job. I'm a science writer.
Mathematicians will always have an answer for everything because they have to. And I put more faith in a grand designer than I do in accidents happening numerically.
For Rushnell, the stories are evidence enough. Like this one about actress Diane Lane, whose father drove a New York City taxi when she was a kid.
And he would come and pick her up after school. And she would stand on her tippy toes looking for that one cab out of all those cabs, 6F99.
Remember that number, 6F99. Shortly after her father died, Lane was in a car in Manhattan thinking about her dad.
At that moment, her car pulled to the curb, she stepped out, and her heart leapt. Pulling in right in front was cab number 6F99. Now, what are the odds that that one cab, her father's exact medallion, would be at that exact spot, at that exact moment in time, to give her a message of hope and reassurance?
It's all familiar territory to the Solomons, whose list of coincidences seems almost endless.
And our fathers have the same exact birthday, June 10th. And her father went to Boston University, and so did I. And his roommate from college became my dad's roommate.
Get out.
New thesis.
One thing believers and doubters agree on, you are more likely to find life's amazing coincidences if you're looking for them. Do you think I'll have one of these today?
I bet you do. Only if you allow them.
Oh, I'm ready.
Once you see a God wink, you see them all the time.
Picture this. You're sitting at home alone watching YouTube videos, wondering why you can't find the motivation to do the things you need.
All right, so let me speak to this for a second, because that's why we're here for today. So I want to see where I want to start. You could do something and not even know how you did it. Intuition, right? You'd be like, dang, I don't even know how I did that. I just kind of knew how to do it. And then you could go somewhere and something could happen, or you could put something together for a plan or something, and it goes unexpectedly in a way that is like, this is like, man, was this random? It don't even feel random. It's like a coincidence. And those two things put together give you a world of not only possibility, but a world where you yourself can witness the design of it all. And so I don't attribute it necessarily to some magical force or to math. I like to attribute it to God wink. God winks from now on. That's what we do. That's what we saying. God winks. Stop calling me. I can't talk at the moment. And the reason why is because when they showed the illustration of the box, I don't know if y'all saw it, but the illustration of the box with the stuff coming out of it, like, because once you see it, it's like it's a pathway into that relationship, into that new thing, and so if you want to sit down, ooh, this is gonna be good. If you want to sit down and you want to map out your life from now on, what you do is think about all of the connections along the way you need to make that's gonna seem impossible, so that when you see them happen, you like, yo, I know what path I'm on now, because I just couldn't have happened any other way unless I'm on this path. I don't know about y'all, and then I'm gonna play another video. I don't know about y'all, but I can't go for too long knowing something exists that could be beneficial to me and not use it. Go ahead, Dan. All
right. What the science is showing us.
This ain't long enough.
At Fiverr, we offer 3D rendering services. But you probably already know a guy who knows a guy who has a cousin who has a neighbor who could do it.
You already know. I like that.
You ever catch yourself saying something like, wow, what a coincidence, only for that exact same thing that was supposedly a coincidence to happen again, or something eerily similar? Or perhaps you've noticed that this so-called coincidence intuitively feels like there's something more to it. I mean, isn't it kind of strange that so many, again, so-called coincidences appear in our life time and time again? And because most of us don't know how to explain it, we just chalk it up to exactly that, a coincidence. But what if I told you it wasn't merely a coincidence, but it's actually a pattern? That these coincidences actually mean something, and usually it means something very specific to you and your situation. I want to replace the word coincidence, which literally means a remarkable concurrence of events or circumstances without apparent causal connection, to something different known as a synchronicity, an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. This comes from Carl Jung, who actually wrote a paper on the topic of synchronicity. There are no accidents or coincidences in reality to something different known as a synchronicity, an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. This comes from Carl Jung, who actually wrote a paper on the topic of synchronicity. There are no accidents or coincidences in life. Everything is synchronicity, because everything has a frequency. It's simply the physics of life and the universe in action. This comes from Rhonda Byrne, who is the author of The Secret and the subsequent books after. So clearly there is a level of thought that believes these things that a lot of us think happen by chance are not happening by chance, but there's actually something to them. Now before we move on, I'm not saying that chance doesn't exist, or I would rather put it different levels of probability, as it can be easy to go off the deep end and interpret every little...
I'm gonna talk and speak to why I'm doing this specific talk on Mental Health Thursdays in a minute.
Synchronicity as some heady thing, or really overanalyze all of this. You can see this manifest in certain ways, like people not making any decisions unless they get some kind of sign or a tarot card reading or an angel number or something similar. Now I'm actually not even saying any of those things are bad under the right circumstances. All I'm saying is to not get so heady or over analytical to this, and to use our discernment instead. That being said, in my experience and the experience of many different people, synchronicities serve as amazing feedback in our life, especially when we're coming to life with an open heart and we're raising our consciousness and we find ourselves in consciousness levels like love, peace, joy, acceptance, courage, willingness, and similar emotions. And in fact, it can even be amazing feedback when we're in not so high consciousness states, lower consciousness states like fear or guilt or shame or things like that. Because the synchronicities we get when in that state serves as amazing feedback to let us know we've actually veered a little off track and maybe we should adjust what we're doing. I've heard synchronicities described as the universe winking at us or whispering to us, almost like little pieces of advice. And I think that's a very poetic way to look at it. But I want to give you basically what I do when synchronicities start coming into my life. And if any of the things I do resonate with you, you think it's going to be beneficial to you, I would invite you to do the same. Now, the very first thing I do when I notice one of these synchronicities, again, it might seem like a so-called coincidence, is I become aware of it. I bring it into my intention instead of ignoring it. Now, this could be simply an acknowledgement that a certain number pattern is showing up in my life, and we can look at this through the study of numerology. This could be that I'm in a very loving energy, and then so I'm receiving the physical expressions equivalent to that loving energy. I'll take notice of these things too and acknowledge them. It could also be that I'm seemingly getting quote-unquote negative synchronicities, negative feedback, and perhaps I'm noticing that I'm getting a string of them, and I'll take note of it because I probably need to pay attention to that. Whatever it is, I take it as the natural feedback that I'm getting from the universe, the hints and yes, the winks that the universe is using to try and lead me in a certain direction. Essentially, it's the universe giving me feedback on how I'm being. What beingness am I transmitting out at this moment? Am I coming from a higher conscious place, or am I coming from a more low conscious place? Now, once I have this feedback, I become aware of it, there's really an important decision for me now to make. And it's actually not only what decision I do make, it's how I make that decision, and I'll explain what I mean. And what I mean is, am I making this decision from my heart and my intuition, or am I taking myself out of the flow of the universe? Am I taking myself away from the feedback and getting in my head and being really over analytical? This is why I mentioned using discernment earlier in this video. This is also why so many people become stuck when it comes to making the next move in their life, or a life decision, or even a tiny decision, and why they go to tarot cards, palm readings, and all these different things to make the decision for them. But this is not usually a heart-based decision. It's typically coming from the head. And if it's coming from the head, 99 times out of 100 in my eyes, you are not following the flow of where the synchronicity is trying to take you or what it's trying to show you. Following the flow of life that allows for synchronicities to become ever present in your life doesn't happen while you're in your head. When you're in emotions like guilt, shame, apathy, desire, pride, and so on. In fact, being in those emotions is great feedback, a great indicator that you are actually in your head versus your heart. And that in itself can be a synchronicity that's a time to adjust and make a new choice. Now, I just mentioned this part because I want to give you some more information so you can avoid a trap that many people fall into, which is using spiritual practices and terms and things of that nature to actually stifle their growth because they're doing it from a heady place, versus using it for its initial intention, which is to grow from it, to use it to expand. Now, after I've become a
No one seems to know this, but Amazon actually has a $50 million fund that they have to pay out every single month.
I'm aware of the synchronicity. It's in my awareness. I've seen it coming in my life. I do something that I actually give my students who go through a 6-month consciousness raising transformation program with me, but I'm going to give you this little exercise here in this video as well. It's simple. When you notice a synchronicity coming in your life, a positive confirmation, an aha moment, a little wink from the universe, you're going to capture it and write it in what we call a positive confirmation journal. This sounds so simple, but it is incredibly powerful, because as you do this, you'll start noticing the really powerful laws of the universe working specifically in your life. This will give you confidence in these principles. It will allow you to adhere to them more often, and it's also going to go a long way to raising your consciousness as you stay tuned in to these principles. While doing this, you'll begin to learn that we do live in a finely tuned universe, that there are certain fine-tuned principles and laws that make this universe tick, and that it works for every single person. Essentially, this journal is going to start providing the evidence you need to see this working in your life. It'll start to connect the dots of these laws actually working for you. So one last thing I want to go over before I leave you here and give you some next steps is, you may have noticed I use the phrase fine-tuned universe. And I want to explain this a bit because it could even be the catalyst that allows you to start exploring these universal principles and why we have have synchronicities in the first place? Like, why is that even occurring? You see, many people believe that what happens to us, what happens in our lives, in the lives of others, is up to kind of chance and, yes, coincidences. I can't get into all of the research in this video, but I'm just going to, for now, say that isn't the case, and you can find the evidence to support that. We actually do live in a finely tuned universe with finely tuned laws that can really help us to live a life that we truly love when we learn how to use these laws. Now, some may even believe that yes, we live in a finely tuned universe, but that tune is one of misery and suffering and similar energy. This is actually also untrue, and in fact, it's the exact opposite. Our universe is actually more tuned to love, peace, joy, wisdom, and similar energies like that. Now, when you become aware of this and you start to experience this because you're using the Journal of Positive Confirmation, which will bring you this experience, you start to learn and actually begin to apply the actual rules to the game that almost none of us were taught when we were younger. You start to realize that, again, the so-called randomness or coincidences are actually synchronicities, and they have a purpose. You start to realize that in a fine-tuned universe that is actually loving, you are of course going to receive feedback from it so that you know where you're at and what you're doing. This is why if you're stressed and worried and feel guilty and angry and all those different emotions, you get much different feedback than someone who is happy, joyful, peaceful, loving inwardly. Because the finely tuned universe, through synchronicity, which you can also think of as being in sync with, will give you the feedback, the synchronicities that are in sync with whatever energy you are transmitting out consistently. So basically, if you transmit out fear or similar emotions, the feedback isn't pleasant in the same way that touching a hot stove isn't pleasant, but it gets the message across. And if you transmit out love or similar emotions, the feedback is very warm, embracing, and pleasant. It is also getting a message across, one that is much more encouraging. And at the end of the day, as you get even more advanced into this work, you realize that the so-called negative synchronicities are also very loving feedback. Because what it's doing is simply showing you the result of your choices, and that if you keep making them, you're going to get more of the same. But a new future is always available. And when you finally embrace the feedback, say okay, accept it, and choose differently, new feedback, new synchronicities will start to present themselves as you become more in sync with the natural, loving energy of the universe. Now, if you want some more guidance and more tools that will help you become more in sync with the loving energy of the universe, which will bring in more synchronicities, feedback, and results that are on that wavelength, that are in sync with that loving energy, then join my Facebook group, The Elite Transformation Experience, which I will link in the description down below. Now, in this video, I mentioned the trap of being overly heady or overly analytical, especially towards the so-called spiritual tools, techniques, and practices. Well, I would go watch this video next, where I go over how actually learning more and being heady and being over analytical is actually stifling your success. I also go over why this is and what you can do instead so that you are much more successfully growing, expanding, and living the life you want to live.
We built a 7-figure business as a 2-person agency, and I wish we had HoneyBook when we...
Let's get us another one up in here. And then I'll speak to why I chose this for today. Let's see.
What if you could analyze the odds behind the fairy tale coincidences that people forward in email? Like the twins who died on the same day, or the woman who won the lottery 4 times. It's hard not to share the amazement yourself, but there's always more than meets the eye.
So, with any of these stories, what you are told is the outer shell. Think of it as a walnut shell, or I like to think of it as a Russian troika doll. And you have to try to understand what is behind that shell, or the first doll.
That's Joseph Mazer, and he's not a folklorist or a novelist.
My position is Professor of Mathematics Emeritus at Marlborough College.
How a mathematician approaches stories like these emails can teach us something about the coincidences in our lives. So let's tell a story. In 1929, an American named Anne Parrish went to Paris with her husband. That's why you're hearing this French-sounding music. On one sunny June Sunday, they went to Mass at Notre Dame. They visited the bird market. They had lunch at Dumagot, and Anne went for a stroll. She ended up at a bookstall along the Seine and found Helen Wood's children's book, Jack Frost and Other Stories. She haggled, but it was worth a franc because it had been her favorite book as a child growing up in America. She rushed back to her husband to show him. He turned the pages, and he found a child's writing scrawled in the front. Anne Parrish, 209 North Weber Street, Colorado Springs. That book she bought an ocean away from home was the very same book she had cherished as a child. How could that be anything but fate?
What you're doing is you're looking for the hidden variables. You're never told in the initial story the hidden variables. I started to dig, and I looked into how could that book have gotten to the stall at that particular time, just when Anne Parrish was walking through the stalls. How is that possible? When you start to dig, you find biographies.
Anne Parrish wasn't just a random person. Her mother was friends with Mary Cassatt, the famous Impressionist painter who moved to Paris. That could easily be how the book traveled across the Atlantic through Mary. But Anne Parrish's husband is also a key detail.
Charles Carless is important in this story. In this case, he happened to be a very wealthy industrialist.
That wealth made it more likely for Anne Parrish to do what most Americans of the time didn't: sip wine near the Seine after a 5-day boat trip all the way to Europe. And Paris was one of the most likely destinations. Mary Cassatt died in 1926, just 3 years before Anne visited Paris. Her estate was probably liquidated, meaning Anne's book went on the market. And for English books in Paris, sellers didn't have many options.
What are the bookstores in Paris? There are only two in those years. It was a Shakespeare and Company, and there was the Paris Bookstalls.
Another missing detail? Anne Parrish was a children's book author herself, so that was the first section she'd check when browsing books. With all these facts together, you can start to make some estimates. How likely is it that Anne would go to Paris in 1929? Joe Mazer guesses 0.1, a tenth. He looked at Anne's actual travel records and saw that she and her husband went to Paris every 2 years, like clockwork. 10-to-1 odds she'd go to Paris in 1929 is actually pretty conservative. The likelihood of her visiting those bookstalls? Conservatively, it's 0.3. She was an author on a long trip. There's definitely a 1 in 3 chance that she'd browse for some books. And the likelihood that the book would be in one of those stalls in the first place? With all the factors together, it's probably about 0.01, 1 in 100. Multiply them out, and the odds in favor of her finding that book aren't a miracle. They're about 3,331 to 1. The odds for getting a 4 of a kind in poker? 4,164 to 1.
I could be dealt that in, let's say, an hour's worth of playing poker. Yes, I'm getting numbers, but they're very approximate numbers. These are stories that are human stories, and if you start to mathematize these stories, you are breaking it down too far, and you are approximating things that probably are not really true. I make approximations, but deep down in the set of Russian Troika dolls, it's endless.
Right.
You don't get the real Colonel doll that doesn't open anymore. In these stories, those Colonel dolls keep opening and opening and opening. I mean, I'm not sure it goes to infinity, but it surely goes very deep.
The most important variable might be if you're curious enough to open the first one. Thanks a lot to Joe Mazer for talking to me about his book, and thanks to Alexander Wolcott, who wrote the New Yorker article that gave us Anne Parrish.
We have someone who wants to be president who has consistently attempted to use race to divide.
Let's see this last one real quick. Then after this game, I'll take a slight break and talk. Skip ad. All right, here we go.
John Clauser and Anton Zeilinger were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for proving that the universe isn't locally real. What I love about this story is that it's a story of quite literally some of the smartest people who have ever lived being confused, and how ultimately Einstein was proven wrong, which doesn't really happen all that often. That idea of locally real is made up of two concepts. Locality is the idea that things are only affected by their local environment. You can't flick a switch in another galaxy hundreds of light years away and instantly see the results here, because nothing, not even information, can travel faster than light. Realness, though, is much harder to explain, and that is the focus of the Nobel Prize. Let's start close to the beginning, around the 1930s, where there were two paradigms, two ways of thinking about the physics of small things, like particles, atoms, electrons, photons, etc. The view of Einstein and many others was that the universe is real, that particles, atoms, and electrons have definite properties that are inherent to them, regardless of if they are being measured. Essentially, that if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, it does in fact make a noise. And then there was a countergroup, the anti-realists, championed by people like Bohr as well as many others, that particles have properties that haven't really made up their minds until you actually go out and measure them. That they exist in a wave function of possible states, and only when you actually take a measurement do they really make up their minds. The famous example here is that of Schrödinger's cat that is both alive and dead until you look in the box, and then ultimately you go to prison. This back and forth between Bohr and Einstein culminated in a famous paper called the EPR paper, where Einstein, Podolsky and Rosen put forward a thought experiment that they thought perfectly highlighted that quantum mechanics at best was incomplete and at worst may be totally wrong. Their thought experiment focused on an idea in quantum mechanics called entanglement, that the property of two particles can be inherently related. Their line of reasoning for their thought experiment started with, well, we know that energy is conserved. Things don't suddenly start moving in a direction unless someone or something pushes or pulls them. Neither also do they suddenly start spinning, rotating, jumping up and down, or doing anything else unless someone else is directly affecting them. Number two, if we start with a small quantum mechanical particle that isn't spinning, moving, or doing anything else, let's imagine that particle spontaneously breaks into two. If we look at one of those pieces it breaks into and find that it's moving to the right, we know instantly that the other particle must be moving to the left to conserve momentum. Or if we had looked at it and found that it was spinning one way, maybe clockwise, we would know instantly that the other particle must be spinning counterclockwise to conserve angular momentum. You'd be confused if you looked at this system and saw both particles suddenly moving to the right. Your intuition would tell you that some outside force maybe must have hit them. Or for the same reason, though maybe less intuitively, because most people don't think about angular momentum or spin, you'd be equally surprised if you saw both particles rotating in the same direction. You'd assume that something must have hit them and caused them both to start spinning. Step 3. Quantum.
All right, so we're gonna pause right there since my game is over, and let me speak to how we got here real quick. So, in order for you to be, like I keep saying, healthy mentally, you can't sit and put some stuff in a good box and some stuff in a bad box, because everything's in the house. Now, I hope that didn't go over your head. I hope you caught it. And with that, you got to find some way to rid yourself properly of the bad things and keep and fully use the good things. And what I mean is your house has a toilet, whereas you contain some stuff to put in the toilet. It don't stay in the toilet in your house. It goes out and away. So you got to kind of develop that system within yourself. And a way that I use is by challenging the way that I think about me being here by looking at things like coincidences, my intuition, foresight, all of those things, vision, having vision or imagination. I look at all of those things in order to sharpen my skills and tools that I have here. Imagine you know this exists, you know these things exist, but you don't tap into it. So is it doing you a service or is it causing you harm? So that's why we are exploring this, because you need to be able to look at all the aspects. All right. Let's see. One more. That's too long. All right. Let's go.
Tim just debated J.D. Vance, and if you were looking for the right time to make a donation, the time is now.
The first strange coincidence is the ratio between the masses of two particles, the proton, one of the constituents of atomic nuclei, and the electron. The proton is much heavier, and that ratio comes out to be about 1,836. That's almost exactly 6 times pi to the 5. Coincidence? The second strange coincidence is one between the masses of 3 elementary particles. That's the electron and 2 heavier versions of it, the muon and the tau. If you sum up the masses and divide them by the square of the sum of the square roots of the masses, you get 2/3, up to a precision of 5 digits after the point. This is also known as Koides formula. Coincidence? The third strange coincidence has to do with a constant known as the Planck mass. The Planck mass is the mass associated with the strength of the gravitational force, that's 2 Newton's constant. It's the only mass scale you can construct from the strength of gravity. Max Planck was the first to notice that, which is why it's now named after him. If you multiply the Planck mass with the size of the universe and take the square root, you get approximately the cosmological constant. The cosmological constant is the simplest type of dark energy and determines how fast the expansion of the universe accelerates. It has no known relation to the Planck mass and certainly not to the size of the universe. So is this relation just coincidence? The fourth strange coincidence has to do with modified gravity, or more specifically, modified Newtonian dynamics, MOND for short. MOND is the idea that the gravitational force law changes from 1/r squared to 1/r at a certain acceleration, usually denoted a0. This new constant a0 can be extracted from observations. You don't even have to believe in modified gravity for that. It's just data analysis. This acceleration scale is arguably there and comes out to be approximately the square root of the cosmological constant divided by 3. Coincidence? The fifth coincidence also has to do with the cosmological constant. The cosmological constant is often interpreted as a vacuum energy density. That is, it's the energy density of empty space if you take away all the particles. Strangely enough, this vacuum energy density is currently just about the same as that of dark matter, up to a factor of 2 or so. This is strange because while the cosmological constant is constant, the density of dark matter isn't. In the early universe, the density of dark matter was huge compared to that of the cosmological constant. Why would the two be just about the same size when we set out to measure them so that we can just about see dark energy take over? Coincidence? The sixth coincidence is known as the curvature problem, and it's similar to the previous problem. You see, space could have an overall curvature. That is, it might not be flat, but it could have a positive curvature like a sphere or a negative curvature like Pringles, and it could also do more complicated things like close back in on itself or what have you. This is all compatible with Einstein's theory. Now, if the universe starts out with a very small deviation away from zero curvature, then that curvature grows in relevance over the effect of matter and energy. That means if the universe had a very small curvature initially, then today that curvature would be huge, but it isn't. The universe, for all we know, is on average flat to good precision. So why was the curvature so close to zero at the beginning of the universe? Coincidence? And my seventh and final coincidence concerns the stability of our vacuum. You see, the vacuum of our space is determined by the properties of the Higgs field. Not the Higgs boson, but the field that's associated with it. Our vacuum is in what's called a ground state. That is, it basically sits in the valley of a potential. We know that much. But just how this potential looks like depends on several numbers, notably on the self-coupling of the Higgs and also on the masses of other particles. If the ground state was stable, the potential would look like this. If there are small fluctuations, it returns to its original state. The guys at CERN have been measuring these constants in the potential, and it turns out that our vacuum is not stable, it's metastable. This means it's stable for a very long time, but there are states of lower energy. And since there are always some fluctuations, our vacuum will decay eventually. What happens then is that this extra energy which our vacuum holds will pop up all around us, tearing everything apart. Don't get your hopes up too high though, it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. The expected lifetime of our vacuum is gigantic, something like 10 to the 500 years or so. Or to put this differently, it's very unlikely that it'll happen much sooner than that. But here's the funny thing. If the parameters were a little bit different, then our vacuum would be either unstable or stable. We sit in a small sliver of metastability. Coincidence? What are we to make of these coincidences? Well, one attitude that you can have is to say, there are so many numbers in physics, if you look for relations, you're highly likely to find something. Another attitude you can have is that maybe these seeming coincidences aren't coincidences, but they tell us that there must be a deeper explanation. Indeed, physicists have come up with many possible explanations for these coincidences. Unfortunately, so far, they've all been more complicated than just postulating the numbers, so they've all fallen victim to Occam's razor. But maybe physics is just waiting for you to explain it all. How many of those coincidences did you know already? And how many do you remember now that I'm done talking? Take our quiz to find out. Contrary to...
Alright. So, I'm going to do a little bit of talking after this game. Let me get some music back in here. Alright. So, imagine you not using... you using about 70% of your total potential. Right? That seems pretty good, right? Until you realize you can't get into none of the schools you want to go to. You can't do what that other guy can do, or that other girl can do, or you're not making it as far as you would like to on 70% of your potential, you know? So let's say that other 30% of your potential is tucked away in all of those things that you just don't want to sit down and use. Not what you don't understand is possible, but you just don't want to use what you know is possible. And in that is everything that you want. Just imagine, okay, you're tired of driving your car, right? But you were born with wings. How did you ever get tired of driving your car? How did you get to driving a car? You were born with wings. Well, maybe somewhere along the line you said you got tired of flying and using your wings. So you said, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna build something to where I don't have to use my wings no more. And then eventually you got got so far down the line and so far taken with driving or not using your wings that you started driving. And now you're back again. You're tired of driving. And, so you're tired of running into these same old situations, circumstances, and the things that you're doing and the way that it's going. Pull out that 30% and say, hey, I want to use some of these things I know exist to help, put some wind into my sails, to help put some gas into my engine, to push me a little further along this journey that I'm going here in life. And one of those things is the biggest thing, as a matter of fact, is your intuition. You can use that when all else fails. And I'm not trying to sound like some cliche person out there, whatever that word means. I'm not trying to sound like some person out there that's giving you some feel-good story about how it's going to look good, feel good, and you're not going to have any issues. What I'm trying to tell you at this point is just use what you got to get to where it is you want to be. And if you file something away as you don't understand it, that don't mean you don't have it. You have it. You just don't understand it at that point. So let's move on. That's why I'm playing on Mental Health Thursdays. Some of these, one aspect I feel is really important for you to pull out of your bag of tricks, and that's not understanding or mystery or something you've experienced that you know exists, but you just don't have a grasp on what it is and how it is you can use it. All right, going on. Let's get us something else to listen to up in here.
Wouldn't it be crazy if you could create voiceovers that sound like a
raspy old man,
a young teenage girl,
or a guy with a different accent
all by yourself? Well, that's exactly.
I believe that if these CEOs are not in touch with their emotions in regards to AI, they can be very destructive. We have to pay attention.
All right, I'm here with Molly Carroll. Molly, thank you for joining us here at the AI Summit with our Staying Human interview series.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna need you to look down because you've done a lot of things. So you're an author
Yes.
of Trust Within,
Yes.
which is a book about intuition.
Uh-huh.
You're also a licensed therapist, and you're also the founder and creator of a social emotional learning curriculum called Flourish.
Yes.
That is a lot.
Yes,
That is
it is a lot.
So I want to start by recognizing that most of the people that I'm interviewing in this series are people who are kind of in the nuts and bolts of AI and digging, through algorithms and whatnot. You are in the nuts and bolts of people, right? Which is a lot messier.
Kind of the counterculture.
Yeah, right. So how, I want to start with asking about your book, how do you define intuition?
Well, I think the best way that I define intuition, and this comes from years of experience of following my intuition from when I was a very young child. Okay. I always made some of my best decisions with my intuition, and then doing research for the book and interviewing lots of different people and talking to different scientists and different people around the world about intuition, is that I think it is this combination between the head and the heart. Okay. And I think the head is kind of like our database of memories and experiences, and it's like our Philodeck of intuition. And so when we're making our decisions, our morals, our values, our ethics are kind of in our head in a way. And so when we're facing a decision, we have to focus on the mind and the head. But I feel like I've been a greater part and a more important part and a harder part is the heart. And that is what you feel with your gut, and it's like something that comes out through your body, your hands start to sweat, your heart starts to beat, and it may not always make sense, but it's something you know to be true for you.
So as I walk around this AI summit, which is in this awesome space, most of the companies that are here, most everyone that's here is talking about using AI to make better decisions.
Right.
How do I push those two things together?
In regards to AI, this is what I would say. Focusing on AI and decision making, you have to do it with other humans.
Right.
And I think that's where your intuition comes into play, is when you're sitting in the room with another human being making a decision that's in regards to AI, that makes the best decisions. And I love Bill Gates is looking at it, Warren Buffett's looking at it, Elon Musk obviously is looking at it. They're all focusing on that we have to pay attention in regards to AI, to our decision-making skills, and to our relationships to other human beings.
So one of the things you might say would be that it would be a really bad thing if we abandoned our gut in favor of only AI.
Exactly.
But instead maybe we should use AI, as a lot of people do talk about it, as a tool or a decision aid to set the groundwork for our human interactions with each other when we're making collective decisions.
Well, one of the best quotes I read that I loved is that in regards to AI, human beings like to be with other human beings because they trust them more.
Okay, very good.
So in regards to that, you're exactly right. Like that in order to make those decisions, you have to be involved in human connection. Go as far as you want with AI. Go as far as you want with technology. I don't care how far you go. Just don't disregard the 20% of the human being and the human connection and what happens in regards to that. It's like the shadow side in Jungian psychology.
Right.
We have to look, what is it taking?
What is the best way for an executive or a decision maker who's out there to root themselves down?
Well, you're talking to someone, so my answer may not be the same that a lot of the other people's answers would be here.
Yeah,
okay.
I hope not.
So, but you're talking to someone that believes that we need to implement in children their connection to their emotions. And if we lose sight in that in children, we're losing sight in really important decision makers and policy in this world.
Very good, very good. You're growing it.
Right? So I believe that if these CEOs are not in touch with their emotions in regards to AI, they can be very destructive. Some people can be great on paper, but you're sitting with them and you just don't feel it. You wonder how they'll work with other people. What's their personality going to be like in the office? Are they going to be a giver versus a taker?
Right.
And you feel no, no, no. Do not hire them.
Let me look at something else. One more thing before I get to playing. Let's look at something grungy real quick, just for a second.
President Trump, why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't know. I mean, all I can...
Manipulation is everywhere. The social influence aimed at changing the behavior or belief of a person through emotional coercion, emotional manipulation, has always been prevalent in human interaction. It's in all of our relationships. Companies use it on us to make us buy certain products or feel a certain way, and even influencers use it to make sure they keep their followers. Pretty often, we're made to do things we don't want to do by people we hold in high esteem, without realizing that we're being manipulated by them. Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie once said, "Show people as one thing and only one thing over and over again, and that's what they become." This stereotyping is a form of gaslighting. It's intentionally accusing someone of being a negative stereotype, whatever that may be. A few years ago, Facebook worked in partnership with the University of California to perform an experiment. In this experiment, Facebook purposefully altered the feeds of around 689,000 users, such that some only saw positive stories on their wall, while others only saw negative stories. After about a week of doing this, when these users posted their own updates, most of the time, they had been influenced by the emotions that flooded their wall. People who were fed more negative posts, in turn, put out more negative posts, while those who received a swell of positive posts used more positive language when making their own posts. This rather controversial experiment just shows how easily our emotions can be manipulated, even in very subtle ways. You know, something I've noticed is that people on Twitter are so angry compared to the people on other platforms. Well, maybe this is because negative topics are more triggering, and so they spark more debate than positive topics. These debates then flood the entire platform with negativity, which only continues to influence people to add more fuel to the fire. It's a sad reality that we live in that before making a tweet, you have to read through it once, twice, and then prepare your apology, just in case. We might not know it, but in a way, we're in an abusive relationship with these platforms. Oftentimes, we can't express our views clearly, and we can easily be manipulated by the views of others. Gaslighting is one of the most popular techniques used by emotional manipulators. The term gaslight was first used in a 1938 play. In it, a husband manipulates his wife, convincing her that she has a mental illness and is hallucinating by dimming their gas-fueled lights. Today, the term gaslighting more widely refers to a form of psychological abuse, where the victim is made to seem crazy. In it, a husband manipulates his wife, convincing her that she has a mental illness and is hallucinating by dimming their gas-fueled lights. Today, the term gaslighting more widely refers to a form of psychological abuse, where the victim is made to seem crazy. The reality of the situation is turned on its head, so that the victims start to doubt their own logic and reasoning. The term has been popularized thanks to the internet. However, still not many people understand the concept of gaslighting and how deeply it can affect someone. Children who grew up in unstable homes where things such as abuse, alcoholism, and other issues are rife often experience gaslighting at such a young age. These kids go up to their parents to ask them what's going on after witnessing it with their own eyes. But the parents instead tell them that nothing of such is happening and it's all in their head. The parents might not be actively trying to gaslight their child. In fact, more often than not, they think they're protecting the child from the harsh realities that they're faced with. In truth, though, all that does is make the child question their own sanity and senses from such a young age. And so, they grow up not being able to trust their own judgment, or even that of others, because, well, what if they didn't actually see what they said they saw? Gaslighting doesn't only work in interpersonal relationships. It also works en masse, a phenomenon that some experts call structural gaslighting, convincing a large group of people that their realities are skewed or even flat out wrong. Things like racial and political gaslighting fall into this category. Adolf Hitler is regarded as one of history's greatest emotional manipulators. After the loss of World War I, the last thing the Germans wanted was another war. Everyone at the time believed that it would be another stupid venture that would cost them millions of lives and give nothing in return. Sounds like most wars. However, slowly but surely, Hitler, through his brilliant oratory and showmanship, was able to get the Germans on board. He convinced them that his plan was going to work, and as he took over Rhineland, Czechoslovakia, and Austria, the Germans started to believe. But before then, Hitler made sure that all the radios across Germany echoed that they didn't lose the First World War, but were in fact just tricked into surrendering. He blamed the loss on the Jews and said that they were responsible for the harsh reparations the Germans were now suffering after the war. He managed to convince most of the German population that Jews were evil, and eventually, Germans were either supportive of his movements or too afraid to speak up against him. Nazi Germany was able to emotionally manipulate its citizens thanks to its totalitarian philosophy. Everything was covered from art to music, economics, education, sports, workplace. Even in the schools, students were taught Nazi propaganda, such that they became Hitler's most loyal soldiers. If you've read the book 1984, you would recognize a lot of these themes, and this is one of the tactics emotional manipulators use. They say something to you over and over again until you start to doubt your own cognitive ability and believe them instead. This form of gaslighting is worse because it comes from people who hold power over society, and it doesn't end with gaslighting. It goes as far as preventing people from exercising their fundamental human rights. Sadly, it's not just politicians and leaders who manipulate us. Companies also manipulate us into buying things we don't need. We're constantly sold emotional ads of people drinking a refreshing drink after fighting a bear, or Coke bringing a family together. And while it looks obviously quite silly, in the back of our minds, all of these little things get registered. Remember, show people as one thing and only one thing over and over again, and that is what they become. These companies sell a narrative of their brand and products over and over again, such that before long, that's what they become. That's why you have people who are so attracted to brands that they're ready to defend whatever decision these companies make with their last breath. Although gaslighting is the most widely known emotional manipulation tactic, it's not the only one. Emotional manipulators would often say things like, "If you loved me, you would do this," trying to guilt trip you into doing things that you would otherwise not do. We see this most often in romantic relationships, where one party is trying to get something from the other that they're just not comfortable with, or in parent and child relationships, where the parent is trying to convince their child to go out of their way to do something for them. You'll hear stupid things like, "Well, if I didn't give birth to you, you wouldn't be able to make a living, would you?" Or, "I worked hard throughout your childhood to take care of you, so I deserve to be spoiled," even when the child, young or old, might not be in the best financial position. In a similar vein, emotional manipulators often use responsibility as a manipulation tactic. You'll hear things like, "Well, I already booked the reservations," or "It's your job to do this for me, I'm your partner." They try to trigger feelings of responsibility that would make it harder for you to say no to their request. When all of these don't work, emotional manipulators would resort to the most bare-bones tactics like lying, targeting your insecurities, and straight up threatening you with bodily harm to get you to do their bidding. If at this point in the video you may have started to consider your relationship with someone, then there's a chance you could be in a manipulative relationship with said person. Do you feel like you're in a partnership with this person, or do you feel like you're walking on eggshells? Are both of you committing your fair share to making the friendship or relationship work, or do you feel like you're the only one putting in the effort? How often do they say, "I was wrong, I'm sorry"? Would they instead threaten you to leave if you point out their wrongdoing? These are just a few of the signs to look out for that will help you figure out if you're in a relationship or if you're just getting the shorter end of the stick. No matter how much that person tries to convince you, emotional manipulation is not a form of love. Relationships should be about love, friendship, and being partners. Both of you should have an equal say, and each of you should be ready to apologize when they're wrong. It's easier said than done. We should check ourselves in our interactions with others too, because although we might not want to admit it, we often use these emotionally manipulative tactics to get what we want. Humans are inherently selfish, and so it's not surprising that we sometimes resort to vile tactics just to get what we want. So, while you consider if your partner, friend, or relative might be emotionally manipulating you, you also want to look at your relationships from the other person's point of view. Understanding and accepting wrongdoing is the first step in change. If we never admit to ourselves that what we're doing is wrong, then we'll never see a reason to want to change. Emotional manipulation is tricky. There's a fine line that can be walked that differentiates from something being playful and fun to being borderline abusive. So before anything else, accept that you may have done wrong in the past. Try to retrace your steps to the last time you think you may have manipulated someone. Was it intentional? What effects could your manipulation have had? Next time, before you convince someone to do things your way, think about their position. Think about why they may or may not want to do it, and try to keep your own desires partially tucked away to attend to theirs. This is the only way we'll be able to create healthier, more satisfying relationships for all of us. It is only when we love genuinely that we will be able to equally receive genuine love. You give some and you get some. From politicians to companies to our own relationships, we're all guilty of emotional manipulation. This entire video was just me manipulating you into, hopefully, becoming a better person. And for what it's worth, I hope it works.
That's my guy. All right.
Physical abuse is often the type of abuse that is validated as a marker for abuse. But there are other types of abuse that are just as important, and which are often the precursors for physical abuse. These are psychological and emotional abuse. Although intangible, psychological and emotional abuse can greatly damage a person, sometimes even more so than physical abuse. Here is a list of signs that you've been emotionally abused in the hopes to help with early identification of abusive relationships. Number 1. Withdrawal. Withdrawal can manifest in many forms. It can look like avoiding eye contact, showing fear or hesitancy towards others or a specific person. It can take the form of isolation, where the person doesn't go out or speak to anybody. Emotionally abused people withdraw to feel safe. It may also be to try to avoid or become invisible to the abuser, in hopes that the abuse will stop. But withdrawal can lead to other serious physical and psychological problems if it's done for too long. It might develop into another mental illness or make the one already present worse. Number 2. Low self-esteem and worthlessness. Low self-esteem and worthlessness can be expressed verbally with phrases like, I'm not good enough or worthy enough, I don't matter, nobody listens to me, or some variations of those. To identify that low self-esteem or worthlessness is a problem, the person has to be constantly saying these things. Another way this can manifest is in a refusal to participate in things that they used to enjoy, or not doing rituals that they used to do every night or every morning. Number 3. Changes in appetite or weight. Some abusers take control to the point where they start keeping tabs on what the other person eats. Then, they try to convince the other person to change their diet. In most cases, these changes in diet are not healthy and keep the victim in a weakened state. The abused person may keep this mentality even after the events have transpired because they are still convinced that this is the right thing to do, that they'll become fat and ugly if they do not continue with it, or that something bad will happen if they don't. Do you relate to these 3 signs so far? Let us know in the comments below. Emotional abuse is one of the most difficult types of abuse to identify. It may be subtle and sneaky, but it can be extremely detrimental to your mental health and well-being, which is why we're committed to making mental health content like this more accessible to raise awareness. If you'd like to support our cause, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much. Number 4. Frequent crying or angry bursts. Frequent crying or having bursts of anger and irritability are regarded as signs of distress. Due to the abuse, the victim becomes anxious and hypersensitive to people. They overanalyze everything to try to minimize whatever conflict they think might come. When the anxiety, the fear, or the trigger becomes too much, you may cry uncontrollably. Crying can also be in response to flashbacks or thinking about being punished or abused again for making further mistakes. It can also be expressed as anger instead of sadness in angry outbursts that may or may not make any sense. This is all those suppressed emotions and feelings of violation developed throughout the abuse coming out because they finally feel safe enough to let it all out. Number 5. Blaming themselves for things. Is it normal for you to apologize to inanimate objects like a chair or a sofa after you accidentally bump into it? Do you blame yourself for small things or things out of your control? The abuser often tries to shift all blame and guilt onto the victim, making them believe that it was their fault that things went wrong. After some time of repeating this and supposed reinforcement of outside events, the victim comes to believe this, so automatically blames and apologizes for everything, even when there was no way for them to control or know about the situation at all. Number 6. Fears law enforcement officers. Another sign that you may have been emotionally abused or someone near you may have been emotionally abused is an unfound or extreme fear of law enforcement officers. Abusers know that what they're doing is wrong, and they are aware of the consequences of their actions, which is why they look for ways to prevent their victims from getting help. One of those ways is to make them believe that the police are bad or something bad will happen if they call them. It is a well-known fact that not everybody likes the police for different reasons. Still, there is something to be said when it comes to extreme fear towards them. It could be possible that this person could have had a bad experience with the police that left them traumatized. But if you know that this person has never had an interaction with the police, there may be another cause. Getting help. If you are a victim of emotional abuse, or you suspect that someone is a victim of emotional abuse, we strongly suggest that you reach out to a mental health professional near you. Getting that emotional and psychological help will pave the way for you or your loved one to become stronger, to leave the abusive relationship. It is scary to reach out for help, but reaching out for help is one of the best ways to end the cycle of abuse and get your life back. You are worthy, and you deserve to be happy. So,
yes, ma'am. Let's get a couple of
Empower your students to be more authentic, impactful writers with Grammarly's comprehensive AI writing assistance.
Myth number 7. Only some people are emotional. Emotions are a universal human experience. Although individuals may vary in their emotional sensitivity or to reduce emotional. The overall goal of emotion regulation is to reduce emotional suffering. It's not to get rid of emotions. Some people will always be more emotional than others. In a previous video, I talked about the biology of emotions. In this video, I'm talking about 10 common myths about emotions that can fill your head and make it hard for you to regulate your emotions. I'm Dr. Tracy Marks, a psychiatrist, and I make mental health education videos. Myth number 1, emotions are irrational. This thought makes you dismiss emotions as feelings that you can't trust in favor of using logic. But in reality, emotions serve as valuable resources of information. They guide us in making decisions and help us navigate social interactions. These are not extraneous and irrelevant, but instead serve a physiological purpose. Myth number 2 is positive emotions are better than negative emotions. Society often places a higher value on positive emotions such as happiness or joy, and there's a lot of positive reinforcement from being upbeat and pleasant. On the other hand, negative emotions like sadness or anger are seen as undesirable. Some people have trouble accepting and expressing these kinds of emotions because they were raised to think that it's wrong to be angry. But in truth, all emotions serve a purpose and provide valuable insights into our inner experiences. Negative emotions can motivate change, signal unmet needs, and foster personal growth. Myth number 3, emotions are controllable at will. While we can influence our emotions to some extent, we don't have complete control over them. Emotions arise from a complex interplay between internal and external factors, including biology, past experiences, and social context. Rather than try to control your emotions, we can focus on understanding and managing them effectively. In fact, regulating emotion is really for emotions that are not serving your best interests or helping you achieve something. What do I mean by this? Let's say anger is an indicator that someone has crossed a boundary with you, or you're in a situation where you're being exploited. In these cases, anger can motivate you to make corrections to the situation before the anger becomes deeper hurts like resentment or regrets. So our emotions can be constructive or destructive, and it's the destructive ones that we want to change, not suppress, but modify to prevent them from becoming destructive. Myth number 4, expressing emotions is weakness. Expressing emotions is a sign of emotional intelligence and strength. It allows you to be emotionally available in relationships instead of being closed off and hard to read. Being able to recognize and express your feelings is like strengthening a muscle. It takes practice. Myth number 5, emotional people are unstable. While intense emotions can sometimes trigger impulsive behaviors, it's not a given that all emotions will. Emotions can fluctuate naturally based on circumstances and personal experiences, and experiencing intense emotions doesn't necessarily indicate instability or mental illness. What matters is how we manage and cope with these emotions. Myth 6, negative emotions result from a bad attitude. Emotions, including negative ones, are a response to something. They are influenced by past experiences, biology, and our current situation. Sometimes negative emotions arise from faulty thinking patterns. For example, if you always expect the worst, you can condition yourself to feel fearful and anxious most of the time. Challenging negative assumptions and considering alternatives can help you escape these thinking traps. So rather than blaming your emotions on a bad attitude, accept that negative and positive emotions exist and both are valid representations of your internal world. Where it matters that it's negative or positive is how the emotion makes you feel and how you cope with it. Myth number 7, only some people are emotional. Emotions are a universal human experience. Although individuals may vary in their emotional sensitivity or expressiveness, everyone has the capacity to experience a wide range of emotions. Denying or suppressing emotions can have detrimental effects on emotional and mental well-being. Myth number 8, emotions should be solved or fixed. Emotions are not problems to be solved or fixed, but rather signals and responses to our internal and external experiences. Instead of seeking to eliminate or change emotions, it's more beneficial to explore their underlying causes, learn from them, and develop healthy coping strategies. Myth number 9, emotional health means always being happy. Emotional health does not equate to a perpetual state of happiness. It involves acknowledging and accepting the full spectrum of emotions, including the challenging ones. Emotional well-being comes from cultivating self-awareness, resilience, and the ability to navigate and regulate your emotions effectively. Myth number 10, emotions are permanent states. Emotions are dynamic and ever-changing. They are not permanent states that define who you are. Recognizing that emotions are transient allows you to ride the ups and downs of the wave with greater ease and cultivate emotional flexibility. These are just some of the thinking distortions that you can have about your emotions, how you express them, and how you cope with them. In the next video, we'll take a look at how to accurately identify your emotions. In the meantime, if you haven't seen it, take a look at this video on the science behind emotions. Thanks for watching.
Let's look at this video on the science behind.
No one seems to know this, but Amazon actually has a $50 million fund that they have to pay out every.
Have you ever walked into a room and felt suddenly sad or anxious and had no idea why you're feeling that way? Because no one's around? Your brain can activate strong emotions without you being aware of why you feel that way. That's what I'm talking about today. I'm Dr. Tracy Marks, a psychiatrist, and I make mental health education videos. This is the first video in a series that I'm doing talking about emotions and emotion regulation. We all have emotions and they serve important purposes. They help motivate us to action. Emotions help us communicate with each other. For example, our body language and facial expressions are reflections of how we feel. And often, facial expressions or a tone of voice sends a stronger message than the words that you use. Our emotions also give us information about our environment. You can get a gut feeling that something's not right about a situation. Your gut feeling isn't always accurate, but it does inform you about how you should consider the situation. Is this situation a threat or not? And this is where our biology comes in. There are several brain regions involved in generating and processing emotions. For simplicity, I'm only going to discuss 3 of the areas that are involved, especially when we experience stress and trauma. These 3 areas are the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, and the hippocampus. I'm going to talk about the science of it and then apply that to how that works in real life. The amygdala is a small structure located deep in the brain that acts as an emotional alarm system, like a threat detector. It's a subcortical structure, which means that it acts on instinct and not reasoning. Your cortex is where the reasoning happens. Let's say I'm walking on a sidewalk on a busy street and a car is coming too close to the sidewalk as if it might hit me. Before I become aware of how close the car is, my amygdala senses the danger and triggers the release of cortisol and adrenaline that gives me the power to move out of the way and run if I need to. How did the amygdala sense the danger? It got the information from my eyes, maybe even my peripheral vision, and then the sound of the car as it came close to me. And all of that happened before my mind registered it as a car that's coming too close. Your amygdala is also involved in associating emotions with specific memories. This is why certain memories can evoke strong emotional responses. Another thing the amygdala does is recognize and interpret facial expressions, particularly those associated with fear and other strong emotions. It helps us understand and respond to other people's emotions, which is necessary for empathy and social interaction. Early in development, our amygdala is not that active because we're sheltered and protected by our caregivers. But when there's childhood abuse or neglect, your amygdala becomes prematurely active. This early activation causes excessive and chronic stress hormone release, especially cortisol. So early trauma and stress lead to an overactive and oversensitive amygdala. As powerful as the amygdala is, it doesn't work in isolation. The hippocampus and amygdala are interconnected and communicate back and forth with each other. The hippocampus is a brain structure located in the temporal lobe. It's involved in encoding and consolidating emotional memories. Let's say I get invited to a dinner and I don't know the people that well. They're friends of friends who want to include me in the group. I go, and the hosts spend the dinner hour in heated political discussions, grilling me about my political views. I spend the rest of the evening annoyed and insulted. Months later, my friends have a gathering at their home, and this couple shows up. I see them and immediately feel tense. They haven't said anything to me, but just seeing their face makes me feel angry and fearful. And I feel uneasy because my hippocampus reminds me of the experience and associates them with unpleasantness. Another thing the hippocampus does is link emotions to the context in which they occur. It helps us remember not only what happened, but where and when it happened. So in this case, with the dinner at my friend's house, I associate this couple with having extreme views and being very judgmental. But they could have acted like that because they were drunk and in their own home. Now, being at someone else's house, they may be more personable. That's contextual information that helps me process my initial emotional reactions and adjust my expectations because of the different set of circumstances. So I have this reflex response of,
oh no, I may end up going off on this couple in front of everyone if they start up on me again with this stuff.
But after some context, I pull back from that and think,
there's too many people here for them to act like that, so things will probably be fine.
The third structure is the prefrontal cortex, which is located in the front part of your brain. The prefrontal cortex also helps tame our emotional responses by evaluating the emotional significance of a situation, consider the potential outcomes, and then generate appropriate emotional responses. So it's the thinking and evaluation center. It also has reciprocal connections with the amygdala and hippocampus. So after it performs its analysis of the situation, it sends back information to the amygdala to regulate the intensity of your emotional response. Those are a few of the structures involved in emotion regulation. Here's what happens when things go wrong. When you are exposed to adverse situations early in life, you get premature and overactivation of the amygdala. If the amygdala is overactive, it can override the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex and block them from giving us information that is reassuring. If this happens, you can be at the mercy of your emotions and be so stirred up that you can't talk yourself down or think your way through the situation.
We need stories. We need stories to understand ourselves. We are the only creature that does this unusual thing of telling each other stories.
Because you're missing the perspective information from the hippocampus and the reasoning ability of the prefrontal cortex. It's like your amygdala becomes sentient intelligence and just takes over and dominates the whole system. Brain scans confirm this and have shown that people with PTSD have amygdala hyperactivity and hypoactivity of the hippocampus. This leads to emotion-based reactions, and this is what causes intrusive memories and flashbacks that you can get with post-traumatic stress disorder. With the flashbacks, you re-experience the event as if it's happening now, and you can't pull in the contextual information that you need to ground yourself. You don't see and experience the obvious facts like what you're thinking about happened in the past, and you're safe now, and you do have the power to protect yourself in the present. You can't think through it like that because you don't have the information you need from your other brain structures. All you know at the moment is what your amygdala is making you feel. Even if you don't have PTSD, you can experience adverse situations that are distressing to the point where you become overwhelmed with emotion. Some people are more vulnerable to feeling this way under stress. In fact, chronic stress produces increased exposure to higher levels of cortisol. High cortisol is neurotoxic to the brain and causes the hippocampus to shrink. People who get depressed for long stretches of time have smaller hippocampuses. A smaller hippocampus can't stand up as well to the active amygdala, which leads to overwhelming emotions under stress. The good news is the hippocampus is plastic. It's not made of plastic material, but it's moldable. You can get nerve growth called neurogenesis in your hippocampus and other brain regions, including the prefrontal cortex. There are things that promote neurogenesis, like exercise, intermittent fasting, curcumin, omega-3 fatty acids, diets high in the flavonoids found in fruits and vegetables. These are all things that I've talked about in other videos. What else promotes neurogenesis? Psychotherapy and learning new skills. Learning new skills is what I aim to do in the next videos in this series on emotions. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching today. See you next time.
All right, y'all. So we about to get up out of here for the day. That was our last video. I'm gonna finish this game. Let me switch back over. I'm gonna give y'all my final wind down messages. And remember, we not gonna be here at 11 o'clock every day no more. This was just because I had prior engagements, and I'm gonna give y'all some extra game time today anyway. We're going to do 24 hours. For 24 hours, we at 4 hours right now. Yeah, we at 4 hours. And 58, we about to go to 5 hours. Try to win this game. They let me get that block. Y'all just enjoy this game. Cheer me on if you out there. 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 Yeah, once I'm done with this game, we out here for the day. We got 2 minutes left. Like I said, I'm gonna talk to y'all real quick. All right, so the reason, like I said, I played these particular set of videos, or I chose this particular topic, is because you have to be able to use the resources in your mind. You can't file things away and say, hey, well, I don't know what that is. We watched on Tuesday that some of the inventions we use every single day, or we use or are commonly known, were accidents, like matches. So you have to take those things that you are unsure about, that you may not understand or not be fully in tune with or afraid of even, and you have to find some value in them, and that'll keep you mentally healthy. All right, that's my message. Yeah, just find the value in everything. Find the value in as many things as you can. I am deathly afraid of spiders when I see them. I have not found the value in that yet, but they have found the value in some of their venoms, and the humanity has found the value in them, although I am scared of them. So that's my spill for today. That's my matches for today. I hope y'all enjoyed again. Remember, synchronicity. God winks. I'm out. Peace. This is DGTA TV. Chill.
Bye.